Sean Payton is innovative, fearless, and most importantly, in touch with his team and his players. He's not soft, but demanding and uncompromising in his ask for the best from his men. They deliver mostly because they respect him and sees that he wants himself to be great and accountable to them. That breeds confidence and makes the head coach relatable to them and relevant. You must have the team if you want the wins, and Sean Payton clearly has everyone's attention. But how does he do it, and through what processes? I think I'm going to ask him right now. Sean, welcome to Great Dane Nation, brother.
Hey,
how do you do it, man?
Listen, Mort, I appreciate you having me on. First off,
yes,
great question, great topics here. I think, I look back to, it's been 15 years, but my first year here with the Saints was 2006. And typically speaking, when you're hired as a new coach, you're coming into a program that hasn't been successful. I know that's not always the case, but most of the time, there's a reason you've been hired and there's change. So when we talk about creating a culture, there's a vision relative to, and I think the most important thing is to the people you want to bring into the culture. Before we get into the wins and before we get into a team that's buying in, I think it starts with the ingredients of that team. And that's not just the players, it's not just the coaches, it's the trainers, the strength and conditioning, it's the front office, and it's really something that we've got to identify and be very specific about. We want people that are highly motivated. We want people that are smart. We want people that are willing to and able to be and work in an unselfish environment, which sometimes is more challenging, especially in today's game. And I think, look, I think can the athlete, the player, can the coach, can the young scout, can they take coaching? Are they willing? Are they able to laugh at themselves? Do they have a good sense of humor? Look, you're going to have adversity, especially in a long season. There's going to be a stretch where you're going to need to rely. You know how we always talk in athletic performance, you'll always use that expression, we want to fall back to our fundamentals when we get tired, or fall back to our fundamentals when we're trying to correct something. And I think that same thing applies. We need to be able to fall back into makeup toughness, mental toughness. We need to fall back into some of those areas when we lose 2 weeks in a row, and know that the solution is internal, not external. So I think most importantly, it's identifying those traits that you're looking for. And look, the group can kind of move in a direction of where its numbers are and where the strength is. And I think for us in 2006, we were able to get those right individuals in place to lead. I think it's just as important the coaching staff is on the same page and leading in the same direction. And I think that then you can begin to build something. It doesn't guarantee wins and losses, but it certainly is better than the latter, which can guarantee losses.
It resonates with me so much what you're saying, Sean, about reverting back to fundamentals, to your happy place, to a place that you can trust. And I know from my own experience, I played for a long time, and you're not going to make every kick. And so in my analogy is basically, if you put a couple of, bad kicks together, you want to make sure it doesn't become a habit, doesn't become a pattern. Let me go back and look at film when I was really balling and hitting the ball well. I tell my young kids that. I think that's what you're referring to. And I think as a head coach, one of the most important jobs of a head coach is actually to guide the team through a distasteful situation so it doesn't become habit, but so it becomes a blip on the radar, if you will, and then you're right back to the winning ways, the dominant, positive behavior, and not these negative thoughts that eat away at a team. I think what you've done really well, and your coaching staff and your players have done really well and bought into, is this notion that, yeah, we will have distasteful situations, but we can bounce. We will go to a place and learn from it. And jet pilots don't look in the rearview mirror. We're looking ahead, and we're going, and we're trusting each other that we're all accountable and taking care of it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Because look, in the end, this topic we're on requires a little bit of uncommon behavior as opposed to what would be common. Common behavior might be to lose confidence quicker than you'd like to, or common behavior might be to back away and not become so invested because you don't want the pain again to feel the same. As uncommon work ethic and uncommon dedication and uncommon willingness to be selfless, if you will, as a player or as a coach. Those are uncommon traits that require dedication and require hard work. And in your case, for the kicker who's missed two from the right hash on the 50-yard line down to the 45, common behavior might mean that it's going to continue or at least be inconsistent, whereas the uncommon kicker, which you don't kick as long as you kicked in this league. That's not a common trait. That's an uncommon trait, and it's a skill set, but it's also a mental toughness of being different, of being exceptional, being not the norm. And so, we've used that term, and Mike Krzyzewski gave it to me a few years ago. It's embracing the challenge and being uncommon. And I think that requires work. And people talk all the time about confidence. And typically, Parcells always said confidence was born out of achievement, or, confidence isn't something you wish for. It's not something you think about. It's born from demonstrated achievement and accomplishments. And so your first game-winning kick, I'm sure you can remember that you grow right away as a player, and now pretty soon you expect or embrace the next opportunity. That doesn't mean it always comes, but until you demonstrate that type of ability, you can only think about confidence. And so we're constantly, as a team, moving in a direction, and our jobs as coaches, our jobs as players, and in this is to understand, hey, this is where we want to go, and it isn't going to be easy, but we know that there's no shortcut to that, and I think that again takes me back to who are we asking these behaviors from, and that's why the ingredients in your program, the draft process, who we sign as free agents, who we're looking to bring in as coaches, as scouts, those have to be uncommon, special people.
I love that, Sean. And I think about it this way, about performance, high performance business this way. What we're all trying to do is make our positive behavior dominant so we can repeat it over and over again. So we can recruit this behavior under duress in situations that other people would perceive as being very distasteful and stressful. And I talk about pressure a lot. I get asked about it. I don't like the word personally. I think pressure only happens when your skill set doesn't match the task at hand. Yeah. In other words, if it's not in your wheelhouse, if you don't earn it, I would think as a coach, it would be important once you find your players to communicate with them and teach them what their wheelhouse is. So they always have that. And then to build, and then let them excel freely within that system.
Yeah.
Unconscious competence as a human being, as an athlete, is very important. That is the highest level of learning and a being, and that's where we all want to go. But that's earned, and that takes time. And I think when you talk about distasteful situations, and this may be an uncomfortable answer for you, and that's okay. But when we look at the Saints, we look at the team the last 4 years and a very distasteful exits from the playoffs. And if we have to be transparent and get better and move on the next year, what are the lessons there? Because they're always, they're so close and we're right there. And to me, we had the talent the last couple of years to go all the way to the Super Bowl. No question. But we don't go for whatever reason. So as you analyze these last 4 exits too early, in my opinion, what do you take away from it? And what is the lesson and what is the progression of lessons here so that this doesn't happen again, so we go deep next time?
Sure. Well, number one, nothing's promised the next year. And if we go back to really the draft of the 2017 season, we bring in, a great group of players, from Marshawn Lattimore to Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Trey Hendrickson, Alvin Kamara,
unbelievable.
Alex Anzalone, a very good draft class, and a team that really starts the season, I think, in 17, if I'm not mistaken, 0-2, with a tough road loss at Minnesota, and then another loss. And we very quickly are at that junction of the season where we're going to be on the road against Carolina and then traveling over to London. We get 2 wins. We continue to win. I can't recall that any team that wins 12 games, 13 games, there's going to be a stretch where you win a handful, if not more, in a row, and we were able to do that. We're able to get our first round win in the wild cards that year, I believe at home here versus Carolina, and the following week go to Minnesota in the divisional round and lose, a really tough game against a good team, but won at the end of the game. So there's our first roadblock, or first challenge, if you will, where we had success and lost in a very painful way, the last play of the game.
Yes.
So number one, your team understands that, it's never we're going to pick up from where we left off. We're going to start, unfortunately you go all the way back to the very beginning. And that's just how it is. That's what we're paid to do. If it was easy, that more people would do it. That following year, you heard things like, will they be able to recover and get over a game like that? And that next year, we have another really good team. We win 13 games. I think we get the 1 seed.
Yeah.
Of course, we win again with a bye in the first round divisional. Now we're playing the Rams in the championship game to go to the Super Bowl and play a team that we had already played in the regular season, but in a very close, hard-fought game. And of course, there are a number of things in that game that you reflect on, but in the end, in the final, call it 2 minutes, we have that the one play, the no call, if you will, and it's heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, it's difficult. So here comes the next challenge. Can they bounce back from a tough loss like that? They played, we're a play away from being in the Super Bowl. And
Sean, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So now after this Rams game, which I was on the sidelines, I was there, man, with Jimmy Buffett and Ricky Jackson. We're in our gold jackets, and it was electric, and it was a great game, and the way it ended, and you go and you're deflated, and everybody's deflated, obviously, because you feel like it was taken away from you. I'm just going to say it. You don't have to say that, but I'm going to say it. And you go into the locker room. How are you able to communicate anything with those guys? And what did you say?
Yeah, at that moment, there's not a lot that you can say. You talk about, look, here we are in this game, and I think the truth, this one you probably never get over for the rest of our lives. But we're going to have an opportunity to be back in this game, and hopefully it will serve us in a positive way. But man, I'm proud of you. I mean, it's that simple. Everyone knows that. Look, it's going to take a while, and the one thing about our sport, and it's different than baseball, basketball, or hockey, where they're always in a best of 7 or a best of series. It's a little bit closer to the NC2A tournament, in which, man, you have an itinerary set for next week at the Super Bowl, but if you don't win, you have Monday's team meeting, exit physicals. Like, it's so drastic.
So
right?
brutal. So brutal.
It's just the finality is for every team except one. And so, look, we come back after that 18 season, which was a year and a half ago, and again, win a bunch of games, get back into the playoffs, win the division again for the third time, and we're hosting a game. That was the season. We felt like we didn't play up to our abilities, and we lost that first round playoff game to a wild card Viking team, and they came in and had a shoot. They did a good job. They beat us. That was a frustrating year because that was the first round, and prior to that, we had won. We had won in the playoffs and advanced. Mm-hmm. And then this upcoming season, call it the 20 season, which was unique because of COVID. But again, man, there's a grit element. There's a mental toughness element to this team that I like. Mm-hmm. And, here we are back in a season where we win 12 games and win the division again. Yeah. Open up. We were the 2 seed, but with the additional playoff team, we play wild card weekend, and we get our first win and against Chicago, and then the divisional round we play Tampa, and look, we don't play well enough. So to your question, man, no one understands more the process than this team. They understand that the process is working. In other words, how we prepare, how we practice, the successes we've enjoyed, we don't take for granted. And yet we also certainly understand, the preciseness in the postseason when you're looking at 3 games to get in the Super Bowl, or possibly 2, depending on your seeding. And it's that close, and it's that fragile, and it's like having to be able to play your best game for a couple weeks or 3 weeks in a row. It may not be your best, but it has to be good enough, and because nothing's promised that following year. No. So that the team's ability to get away from, recharge, and then start from square one. I've always said this. When you look back, even during your time, winning a Super Bowl is very difficult. A lot plays into it. Any team that's won a Super Bowl will have overcome some adversity at some point during that season, or had to fight through or regroup. Tampa Bay was a good example. This year, prior to their bye week, they had some tough losses, and then they started playing their best football the last half of the season. I really think that it's playing your best at the right time, and then understanding all the things that go into getting to that game, and so it only fuels the fire a little bit more, at least I think for us, and that gets back to the players that we brought into the building. I think it was difficult back for the Bills to lose 4 straight Super Bowls. You would say, man, well, they had a kick that went wide right. They had a couple different things take place. But that's losing that game, and I've been on a staff that's lost a Super Bowl, man, that is difficult to overcome. And the record the following year for a lot of teams after they've lost that game has not been good. And so that ability to come back and regroup and buckle it up again and and start from the beginning is something that can be daunting at times, and yet you rely on the people that you brought in. You rely on uncommon preparation, uncommon ability to get back focused on the task at hand. And so, each year there'll be a challenge to the team. This team will be different than the teams we've had in the past. And yet it's once you've had that taste, in 2009 when we won it, there's nothing like it. And you're one of the things that's most challenging is you want so much for the other people in the room that haven't been there to experience it, because whatever that vision that you think it's like 1,000 times better. You know what I mean? It's 1,000 times better. And so you're obsessed, if you will, a little bit on getting back to that game.
And I want to touch on the Super Bowl victory, but you were also asked to beat a Tom Brady team 3 times in 1 year. Hard to do. Hard to beat the same team 3 times.
Yeah, I agree, Mort. I agree, and yet I would say, statistically speaking, it happens more than the latter. And look, if you studied, it's a division team, right? It can only be a division team because you play them twice. Mm-hmm. But I think that, let's say 18 times. Statistically speaking, I think it happens 68 or 70% of the time. Look, it's a new game, and you take nothing for granted. In the playoffs, it's an entirely different game. But I've been on the side of that in New York when we had to play the Eagles a third time. A few years back, we had beaten Carolina twice. We had to play them a third time. It generally happens more than it doesn't happen. So you just recognize in the playoffs that it's still all the little things, the takeaway, giveaway, all the things that allows you to win in the regular season. So the one unique thing is the teams know each other well.
So as I get to your relationship with Drew Brees, that takes you really into a really just an unbelievable, legendary stretch of wins, and it culminates with the Super Bowl in 2009. I was just spending some time with Troy Aikman, and he had mentioned to me that in a meeting, if Brees had maybe retired a year earlier, that you might have been looking to go with Tom Brady as an option. Is that accurate?
Well, here's really the end of the season. When the season ended last year, Drew spent some time. He and I talked in my office. I think, and I can't speak for Drew, but man, when you're finished 19 years or 20 years playing, you regroup. You get around those closest to you, your family, your agent, your trainers, and you spend time on a decision, because there's so much that goes into, especially for that position, not only physically, but mentally, it's exhausting. And so a year ago, he spent, a fair amount of time, in wanting to make the right decision. And he and I would text periodically. But in the event that he's not going to return, obviously you look at any potential option. We knew that Teddy was here and getting ready to be a free agent. Taysom was here. At that time, Tom was a free agent, not having spoken with him, but knowing Tom Brady, and he and I share the same agent. So I don't know for certain if Drew had retired, whether that would have happened, because I can't speak for where Tom's mindset would have been. But I think it's every year at this time right now, we're looking at free agency. Is Drew going to return? If he doesn't return, how do we see the quarterback room shaping up?
How do you see it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think right now, well, there's 2 players under contract, and that's Drew and Taysom. I think number one, Jameis Winston, we had a good year to work with, and he's someone, I've said it on record already, that we'd like to sign back. I'd like to see him competing to be that guy. Now, all of that's predicated on what happens with Drew, and I think we'll know sooner than later relative to his decision. But there are some moving parts this season that are different. And the first thing for every team is, generally speaking, you operate on a budget. That's your salary cap. And we know what the cap number is. This is the first year that I can think of, because of the uniqueness of COVID, that every team is waiting to find out what that number is going to come in at. And so, are you going to, as a family, if you're waiting to hear about your family budget, are you going to be able to afford cable TV? Are you going to have the air conditioners running? Are you going to
Right.
These are budget decisions. And so we're kind of in that mode and preparing. There's two elements taking place. It's free agency that's coming up, and then obviously your early work on the draft. But I think we're going to know a few things here in the next 2 weeks. If you and I were on this podcast 2 weeks from now, I think we would know what the salary cap number is going to be. I think that's going to happen.
We'll talk in 2 weeks, Sean. We'll talk in 2 weeks.
I'll be back. All right. We'll know what the salary cap is, and I think we'll probably know where Drew's headed relative to his fantastic career.
Yes. Am I safe to say that you're not going to trade the whole draft for one player like Ditka did with Ricky Williams?
I remember when that happened. I don't think we're looking to do that. The key is finding the right players, and it's easy. We spend so much time in the draft talking about the first round, and I think by nature it's the round that the fans are most drawn to, because there's so many players. We're in the middle right now of reading 338 players. It's the first read. The scouts are back on campus, and we're going to go through this group. But typically speaking, if you're really looking at a good draft, obviously it's not just the players selected in the first round. In 2006, our first year, you don't realize it at the time, but that draft were the pillars of what became a real good team. And Reggie Bush was at the second spot of the draft and went on and played well for us. But more than that, it was Roman Harper, who played 14 years in this league, or 13 years. Then it was Jari Evans, who went on to have a great career and I would say a Hall of Fame career. Rob Ninkovich, who went on to have a great career. Now, not with us, but with the Patriots, and won 2 Super Bowls there, and a very good player. Marcus Colston, Zach Strief in the 7th round. I mean, I think that the trick when you're really measuring a good draft, it's not just that first round, but how are those other selections playing out, and they're so important to today's game.
And the way you evaluate and the way you learn that, it comes with time, with time and experiences in that room. And when I look at your journey, Sean, and I just want to spend a little bit of time to tee it up for our listeners, because a lot of them may not know that you were slinging the rock pretty well at Eastern Illinois, Eastern Airlines, back in the day, and that quarterback tree there looks pretty good with Romo and Garoppolo, and you were the best of all of them. You still have the record of 509 yards there. Pretty impressive. That's when you kind of got the taste. I know you're a California guy, but you've spent more time on the East Coast.
Yeah, look, we moved at a young age from California to Philadelphia, and then settled in Chicago. And I was lucky enough to really have a good high school coach, someone who really helped me in so many different ways. I started really just my senior year, but I loved playing, and I loved the game, and I knew I wanted to play as long as I could, and if not, get into coaching. And then I got recruited to Eastern Illinois, and played there. Mike Shanahan was a graduate as well. I just saw him last month, but he was the guy that you heard about that went to Eastern, not just as a player, but he was coming into his own as a coach. And so, that opportunity, gives you some confidence, not just in football, but, you go to college, and part of that experience is all the other things you learn socially about being in school. And so that would be kind of home. not too far from Indianapolis, Ben Davis, where you went to high school. And
That's right.
so when I finished, I knew I was getting into coaching in 1988 as a graduate assistant. And there are a lot of moves, at San Diego State for 2 years, and Indiana State in Terre Haute, and then back to San Diego State, Miami of Ohio, University of Illinois. My dream was to coach in the Big Ten because that was the conference. If you're from that area and you grow up in the Midwest, to coach at the Big Ten, I wanted to get recruited to that level, but I wasn't good enough, and so I wanted to work to become a coach at that level. And I remember when I first got hired at Illinois as the quarterback coach, I just thought, man, this is awesome. This is an in-state school. And then the NFL kind of just finds you sometimes. And I ended up taking a job with the Eagles for a couple of years, the Giants, and then
you and I were together
in New York. I've got a picture
with the Giants in 2001.
2001.
And you're the offensive coordinator in 2000, and you go to the Super Bowl. You get beat by the Ravens and a very good defensive team.
Yes.
And then I come in, lucky enough, and have a tryout and beat out Daluiso and a couple other guys. I don't remember who they were, but anyway, won the job with Jim Fossil as head coach. And you were the OC there, and we didn't have a great year, but we were good. I thought we had a great team.
Yeah. Well, look, I've got a picture still. Because I believe it was 9/11.
Yes.
We played our first game was on the road at Denver. It was the first game played at the new Mile High Stadium. So that was
Monday night game. Monday night.
It was going to kick off their new stadium. We were the first game in it. And, when you play Monday night on the West Coast, you travel after the game, of course, and, we get back at, call it 6:30, 7 a.m.
Yep.
Our plane actually pulled up into Newark, right near one of the planes that
Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that went down outside of Pittsburgh. We all got on buses. The Giants, you got on buses, and it took you to the Meadowlands. And then if your car was there, you could go home. And the coaches, we were getting ready to play Green Bay that week, and that was the game that was canceled. And so all of us were in New York basically during 9/11, and there were so many different stories, obviously, events that took place. It was horrific. The games were canceled that next weekend, and the following weekend we played at Kansas City, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And after that game, all of us had our New York Fire Department, police. We all had our Navy.
I have that photos too, Sean. It's such a good photo, man.
It's fantastic because it's still the same locker room. The visiting locker room. If you go into Kansas City Arrowhead, you go in the tunnel, and I don't care if you're the home team or the away team, you make a left.
Yep.
And if you're the home team, you're the first locker on the left. If you're the away team, you go down a little further.
It's unbelievable.
You come out the same tunnel, and yeah, they have a big sign, "Welcome to Arrowhead," with a decibel level of however loud it is.
Yes.
But it was the only time. And I guarantee you in either of our careers, because we've been in Arrowhead more than just that time, it was the only time where we got cheered.
Yeah, standing ovation.
Because of 9/11, and it was an emotional time. It's where all the league networks kind of went to that stadium for the national anthem. And it's a memory that, look, we'll always have. That picture I have in my phone, and when I'm done with all of this and finally get organized, and because I'm the worst, I've got like memorabilia everywhere, like cluttered in closets, but that would be a picture worth framing.
Oh yes,
and because look at all the people in that picture that shared that experience. It was a great win, obviously a hard fought win on the road, but it also took you to a time of where our country was, and it was much bigger than just sport.
One of those guys in that photo was Jason Garrett, who held for me.
Yeah.
And he started holding for me after the Kansas City game because I had to punt a Rodney I forget his name, Rodney something holding for me. And he blocked the ball. I fired him. I fired him on the spot. I said, "You're not holding for me, man." I went right to Fossils. And I go, "I need Jason Garrett," and Jason was willing to do it, and he held the rest of the year for me. But at what point, that was just a little background on that. But Jason, who I really love very much and respect, did you know that year? You knew he was a smart guy, and he was backing up Kerry Collins.
Yeah.
Did you know he was going to be a head coach in the league one day?
Well, it's hard to predict if someone's going to be a head coach. I knew he was going to be a coach. It was in his family. He was his parents had a number of children. His father was a longtime coach and great scout, an amazing football career. And I know that, Jason's brothers, his family, they lived it. And so Ernie Accorsi was smart enough at that time, and I'll give him credit. We were going to develop Kerry Collins, and he's coming in to become the starting quarterback. And Jason was a huge part of Kerry's success because he came in having been a backup for Troy Aikman. He had great insight. Occasionally a meeting might end, and he'd come into my office and say, "Hey, maybe we have a little too much in on third down," or Kerry really likes. He just had a great tact about him. He's number one. He's a fantastic coach, but an even better person and extremely smart. So he was a great confidant for me because I was a young first-time coordinator, and I knew that he would get into coaching someday. And then, quickly his career path took off, and he's doing fabulous. Yeah. But he played he was very important to our success, or to Kerry's success as well, which meant the team's success. And I'm sure a great teammate because he had been in the league at that point. I would say you were the most tenured player on that roster, and I
would say so.
Right, but I'm going to say Garrett had to be in the right 2 spot possibly.
Yeah, I would say so. But he was a player's coach. He was what I mean by he was a player who basically connected you as an offensive coordinator to the game plan, and maybe a real good sounding board for Kerry. And then if Kerry couldn't somehow communicate it to you, Jason would fill in the blanks.
Listen, he was just what we all needed, really. The interesting thing in the 2000 season, we have an NFC Championship game that it's one of those games that you're in and it just goes your way. Much like the Super Bowl, man, I felt like if we'd have played that Super Bowl 10 times, it would have been hard to envision the way that team in Baltimore was playing. They were playing so well. But in the championship game against the Vikings, it was just one of those games where a lot of things went well. And by the fourth quarter, the start of the fourth quarter, it was 41-0. And so, when do you in our league ever get to put your backup players in for a whole quarter? That doesn't happen maybe once every 2 years, right? Maybe you get them in with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but that's just not the norm. And I can recall, and the other thing is, you don't have backups for every position. When you look at a pro sideline, they're very thin. You might have 8 offensive linemen. You don't have 10. You might have 1 backup quarterback. You might have 5 receivers. So it's different than college. But I can recall Garrett going in. I'm going to say there was 13 minutes, 58 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Might have been 14 minutes. We got the ball, and we had the longest drive. Garrett's on the field as a quarterback with 13:58 on our, call it, 20-yard line, and the game ends with him taking a knee on their 20-yard line. Now, in order for that to happen, there had to be penalties both ways. It was the longest drive ever, and it was pretty much the whole fourth. It was really the whole fourth quarter, and he ended up taking a knee at the end. But we've always been close, stayed in touch, and I think the world of him.
Let's get to you and Drew, and that relationship starts in 2006, and it, like I said earlier, it culminates in 2009 with you and Drew, pretty happy campers hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And of course, I was on Bourbon Street when you won the game against Peyton Manning, a very good Peyton Manning who had a hell of a year. And that had to be ominous, number one, to face a team that, led by Peyton Manning, but also it had to be special because Peyton's from New Orleans, and we know about Archie and Eli and Cooper and the Manning family as a number one family of football. So I don't even know where to start with you and Drew, but I guess it starts really by being thankful that he didn't end up in Miami.
Yeah, I'm at the combine that year. We have the second pick of the draft, Mort. And we're trying to figure out what direction we're going. I think we were at a juncture where we probably felt like we weren't going to use that pick for a quarterback. And we found out that the Chargers had released Drew because of his injury. There were a number of things. The bigger challenge was the type of injury he had. There was no record or on record case of a quarterback overcoming, a fully torn rotator cuff on his throwing shoulder. In other words, there wasn't an example that, this happened in -- that he was able to play 2 years later. There was none of that. And so we were kind of going down a little bit of an unknown. And there was this understanding, though, that if anyone could do this, it would be someone like Drew. And so, look, long story short, there were two teams beginning to recruit him, us and Miami. And ultimately, we had to take on more risk. And we were just putting our program together. And fortunately, we were able to acquire him. And it was, you can't even begin to think of how things would have unfolded otherwise. But he came to New Orleans, and he couldn't throw even during the mini camp. It wasn't going to be until the following training camp that he begins throwing a football at practice. And even at that time, it was 25 to 30 on the first week, and then 40. There was a pitch count. And Pete Carmichael, our quality control our quarterback coach, had been in San Diego with Drew as a quality control coach, and it was coincidental. Pete was hired here long before Drew was released. So Pete was the only reference point as to what his arm looked like when he was, and so as he's progressing during training camp and he's throwing in the preseason, you're seeing it, but you're still seeing someone who's limited and man, focused on recovering. Deuce McAllister was recovering from an ACL at the same time. So two very important pieces to our team weren't fully healthy. But periodically, I'd say, Pete, where are we at? Is it getting close to what you remember? And Pete would be, you have to see Pete. He'd say, no, it's not there yet. And so, when you're in training camp, you grow not impatient, but somewhat concerned. And then right towards the end, I know that he had a moment he felt really good about where something twitched differently on a pass that he threw. And I think you could appreciate this. Something took place on two throws in a preseason game that we wouldn't be able to recognize that he felt. And he said to me, I'll never forget, hey, it was almost an excitement in his voice, but also a relief that, hey, it's going to be fine. Today there were two things, and sure enough, man, even when the season started, he might not have been 100%, but that recovery that he went through was unprecedented, and it began there. And so,
do you remember the throw, Sean? Do you remember the two throws he did? Was it an out? Was it he fit the ball in somewhere where he normally said, that's a tight fit?
I'll be honest, we played the Colts, and our preseason games that were home were played. One was in Shreveport, the other in Jackson, Mississippi. The dome was still being fixed. So it was against the Indianapolis Colts, and it was an unremarkable preseason game. I think we lost the game. I think he had an interception or two, but it wasn't any specific type of throw, and you wouldn't have known it. But I remember him talking to me after the game, and that was, I just remember it was something he was strongly convicted about, that he felt something different that night that he was really encouraged with. So we were too. And the first throw that I saw in live action that I thought, man, and it was the first regular season game. We were on the road to Cleveland. We won in a hard-fought game, fairly low-scoring game. The second regular season game was at Green Bay. So the first two games were on the road. At Green Bay, he threw a pylon route to Marcus Colston that was magnificent. And so that was the first throw that you saw. When I say down the field, 53, down the field. And so that journey for him really was in the rehab, and the countless hours I'm sure that he spent working to get his throwing shoulder ready for football, and then it all kind of unfolded from there. For Deuce, the same way. Deuce got healthy, played exceptionally well for us that year. Drew the same way, and remember at the very beginning we talked about starting off in your program and identifying what we want, what we're looking for, and then having some good fortune. That plays into it a little bit. Now that doesn't find you unless you're looking for it hard. And we had some good fortune in banking on makeup. It wasn't just the injury; it was banking on the right type of person that we thought could overcome the injury, and that's a credit to Drew.
And you build a program with Drew, and you give him the freedom to, and I'm not privy to that, but how much freedom did he have to change plays? Did you guys stay pre-scripted? I mean, he had his audibles, obviously, yeah. and all of those things based on what he sees out there, obviously.
We had the benefit. One thing, I mentioned Pete Carmichael, who was our quarterback coach. We hadn't really started anything yet. We hadn't gone to spring ball or mini camps or OTAs yet. And now that we have Drew, Pete had the insight as to the terminology that he was used to. And so, look, the terminology is just a method to communicate. So we began to put in or change maybe principles that were named something else and convert it to what he knew just because it made sense. No one had gotten it yet, so we might as well.
Give me an example.
Yeah, you run a tiered route with a deep post and let's say a kind of a high seven or corner route or sail route, and someone in the flat, where you read the deep throw and then you're really high low in the weak flat or strong flat defender. It might be Y sail. It could be you could have a number of names, but the terminology in San Diego was Flutie because Doug Flutie, who was there, loved that play. So they called it Y Flutie, F Flutie, X Flutie. Whoever ran the Flutie, you knew it was going to be accompanied by a skinny post and someone in the flat. So, quickly on the computer, we changed it to Flutie. And so to this day, we have a play named after Doug Flutie, who we never coached, we never saw.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it just sounded good.
And it resonated with Drew.
He knew it. That's right.
That's beautiful. So 2009, let's just talk, Super Bowl, because the city was so hungry for it. We had some teams in the 80s and 90s that perhaps could have gotten there, but didn't get there. And then certainly you guys, what you built from 2006. So in 2009, what's the perfect storm and why does it happen then? Why didn't it happen sooner? Was there anything you can point to that said besides great players?
Yeah, look, man, that draft class was coming into its own. And I would say we had a few key pieces that came in free agency, and we started right at the beginning winning. I think we won 13 straight games in a row. Here's the challenge with that game. The game itself, the Super Bowl, is that for a city that hadn't experienced going to the Super Bowl, the concern was the elation of just playing in the game. And there's a difference between just going and then winning it. And so you mentioned Peyton. He's had a fabulous year at that point. And mind you, they had just not too long back won a Super Bowl against the Bears in that very same stadium. It's 4 years later, 3 years later maybe. I think it might be 3. They're back in Miami. They're at the same hotel they stayed at. I'm sure Peyton's staying in the same hotel suite that in other words, they were used to that, and the newness wasn't anything unusual, where for for our team and our city, it was like Mardi Gras all over. So controlling that and then refocusing and getting ready to not only be in the game but have a chance to win the game was a big thing.
The one play that stands out to me, well, there's several, but there's one that was so ballsy and so unexpected and changed the momentum of the game, was the onside kick to start the second half. Is that something you called? Was that planned?
Yeah, the plan came from look, Parcells was at Miami as the president. We have a week at home before we travel and then a week of practice. And so 2 weeks before the game, and he just referenced that, look, you're playing a real good team. You're playing a really good offense. He had run a fake punt back when they went on the road and beat Joe Montana and the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. He just talked about stealing a possession somehow because and the mindset initially was the idea of a fake punt, but Thomas and McMahon, all of these guys that are on special teams kind of came to me and they said, Coach, these guys, there are too many looks on their
bailing. They're bailing out.
A lot of different looks in punt on their punt rush that it's hard to predict. And so the focus shifted to this onside kick called ambush that Thomas felt like he was really comfortable and confident. So what started as an idea maybe for a fake punt shifted to an onside kick. And then we practiced it. Yeah, we practiced it a few times in New Orleans, but I didn't want to practice it every day in Miami because you don't know who's at your practice. Wow. Yeah. And so anyway, long story short, it was the only time I went in. We met as special teams first. We treated the Sunday Super Bowl game like a night game. So Saturday night we had special teams meeting. Sunday morning we had our team meetings and breakout meetings. And I had gone into the special teams meeting and said, look, here's the deal. I'm going to call this. I don't know when I'm going to call it, but I'm going to call it. I'm not telling. And you guys just need to make me right. Now, looking at this, but hear me out for a second and see if this makes sense. Back then, a kickoff to the end zone meant the 20-yard line. And look, how many completions does it take Peyton to get to that 40? That's a couple plays. And so, yeah, there's a risk element field position wise that's understood. And yet, back then there weren't any restrictions where alignments were like there are now. And so the only mistake we almost made at the end of the half, the officials asked, which way do you want to kick coming out, Coach? Because we had won we had the ball. So I told them there was a little breeze. I said left to right. And then we went in, and the halftime's 35 minutes. I made a couple of mistakes. I told Morstead, like right when we got in at halftime, that this is what I wanted to do. And he had to sit on that as a rookie for 35 minutes. That was a mistake, right? That should have been done as we were coming out of the locker room. All right. We actually scripted 7 plays right from that 40-yard line where we were going to get the ball on the left hash. And we came out to the field, and I remember doing an interview with Solomon Wilcox, and I was watching the officials they were beginning to set everything up for the kickoff. And I said, excuse me, I ran out. I said, I want to go right to left. And the official said, you said left to right. I said, no, I want to go right to left. So they moved it around, and it was strictly in the event that there was a jump ball. Like a lot of guys on the pile, I wanted it to be on our sideline because it's a lot easier to say white ball when you're surrounded by
that's great. That's great.
So that was almost the second mistake. And look, it ended up being a scrum. If I'd have known it was going to be a scrum, I probably wouldn't have called it because it took 2 minutes to get to the bottom of it. But everyone on the sideline just kept yelling white ball. And so hopefully we'd get the break. But look, more importantly than the kick and the possession, it was the mindset like, hey, we're coming here to win a game. And so we did recover and score on that possession. Look, they came back and scored on their possession, but it kept arguably one of the greatest. I mean, 2 great quarterbacks are playing in that game, and it kept Peyton off the field for, call it, an hour and 10 minutes since his last time he had the ball and halftime. And I don't know how long it was, but that was the goal. And we were fortunate. It worked out.
Take me. So just, take me back to you're watching the clock go to zeros and relief, elation,
Yeah,
pride. What's flooding through you as a head coach, realizing that you just won the first Super Bowl in New Orleans Saints history?
I think there's two things. We knew we were playing a really good offense, and even after the Tracy Porter interception for a touchdown, I think that put us up 2 scores. You'd seen Peyton too many times come back in games, so they came down, I think, down to about the 5-yard line with 4 snaps to the end zone, and I'm convinced, though, clearly with the time left, 3.5, 4 minutes, that there's not an ounce of celebration because you just know they can score and they can score fast, and so they get stopped on downs. In other words, 4th down, incomplete, or what have you. We have the ball, and there's still, call it whatever, minute 40. And it isn't until Coach Caldwell doesn't use one of his timeouts that you realize. But it wasn't. There was no quarter or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. You're on high alert because you're playing an offense that can score, and so it's not until, call it, the last 45 seconds of the game that you begin to realize that this is actually happening. And that gets back to the discussion we had earlier. Is feeling that is it's so special because everyone is part of it, and the journey to get there, the stories, and you'll walk together as a team forever. And that's the same way now you prepare to get back in that moment because it's so good.
Sean, I've listened to a lot of excellent head coaches who've won Super Bowls: Belichick, Parcells, Shula. They all say that the moment is fleeting, that you're not able to enjoy it for that long because you realize, all right, we are champions, but I got to do it again. How fleeting was it for you? Were you able to?
It's the only game where you don't have your players back in the locker room together. Typically you're back in the locker room, you have a brief prayer, and then even after the NFC Championship game, you have, and in that game you don't have that.
No.
Everyone's kind of scattered into the locker room, getting on the buses. But I do remember the bus ride, and you just want it to last forever.
Yes.
Like you're like, Bussy, I don't want to go.
Slow down, take a detour, man.
Slow down. And by the time you get back to your hotel, call it 9:30, all those people close to you, remember, they've been up all day. And you're starving because you haven't eaten, and you're hungry, and your clocks are all different, and you just want it to last forever, and it is fleeting. And the other thing about it is you recognize, like you do every year, but more importantly, that's the last time that this team will be on a field together. It's not having that moment in the locker room is something that you wish you had.
And you had a hell of a party in the French Quarter. Over 1 million people, maybe 2 million people shows up in New Orleans and greets their Saints. I was actually on Bourbon Street when the last whistle blew. I was on a balcony, the Royal Sonesta. And as the game was going on, Bourbon Street was empty. And I took a time-lapse picture of Bourbon Street within a minute, packed after the game. And it was complete pandemonium back in New Orleans. You guys didn't see that. You were in Miami. But certainly saw it a couple of days later. What was the parade like? What was it like to stand on a Mardi Gras float with the Lombardi? And you just realized, we did it, man.
Yeah, I think
we'll kind of finish at that.
What's interesting is, look, if there's one city that knows how to do a parade, it's our city, because they do it every year. That's what they do. Yeah. Mardi Gras, I think, was the week after, and so all these different crews. And I didn't understand Mardi Gras a lot until we moved here. It's a period of time. It's not just one parade. It's not just Fat Tuesday, but it's a number of parades all during Mardi Gras season. So each one of these crews donated a float or two to create like this super parade. And so, look, the kickers and the punters were on the Muse's shoe. Right?
I love it.
Yeah. So all these floats were already done and were made available. We started at the Superdome. It was cold. It was unseasonably cold that night. And yeah, I think it was 4 hours long. And look, I mean, again, it gets back to it's not the game. It's not the money. It's not some of these specific things. It's the journey and all the things that it culminates in that, when you watch a Super Bowl team like this year and you see Tampa Bay, you're jealous because you know how good it feels. And you just can't wait to start again
you're right.
Possibly put yourself in that position to win it again.
And I have no doubt that you're going to be back again. Hey, just real quick to finish up, Sean, I've kept you way too long. I apologize, but it's so intriguing to listen and to just have a conversation with you. I have so much respect for you. And I also want to say on a personal note, Sean, thank you so much for kind of spearheading not only my induction into the Saints Ring of Honor, but also the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You've been a big influence, and it helps and gives me a tremendous amount of street cred when a person of your stature has been able to kind of beat the drums there. So thank you for that.
Listen, those are much deserved awards. We tried to, with the Ring of Honor here, really make it unique, and we go to some stadiums and there'll be 23 players up in a Ring of Honor and they've never been to a Super Bowl. And you're like, I remember talking to Archie just of really trying to create a tough criteria, but a worthy one. And Mort, you clearly, yours was easy and the Pro Hall of Fame the same way.
Appreciate it, brother. So it's
unbelievable. Well, look, we're sharing stories about, me coaching early on and you were kicking. Just the time that someone plays in this league with an average of 3.5 years, maybe. And so when you get into the careers that they're so unique, when someone plays more than 20 years in this league, it's just, it's 10 careers for most people.
Well, I just remember that it made it so worthwhile when I came back in 2006 was able to become the leading scorer in the history of the game. I was 77 points away. I had left the Vikings in 2004, and I was out of football, Sean, as a 45-year-old man for 20 months with the phone not ringing, and being able and being ready after 20 months to come back and play at a high level and actually have my best year ever in my 25th years at 47 percentage-wise really was satisfying. And being able to, against the Cowboys, become an all-time leading scorer. They stopped the game. I gave the jersey to my son. Wow, that was a powerful thing. It wasn't hoisting the Lombardi, which I would have loved, but it was on another level, pretty special.
Yeah.
So, hey, quick answers are all I need here. So I'm just going to name somebody, and you what comes to mind? Bill Parcells.
Winner.
Tom Benson.
Tremendous supporter.
John Gruden.
Grinder, super smart, winner.
Jerry Jones.
Winner. Man, I would say with Jerry, just contagious, a tremendous ally and someone that wants to win, and very personable and great to be around.
Tony Romo.
Man, arguably the most talented quarterback that came out of Eastern, but great guy, great career, tremendous golfer.
Will Smith.
Dominant player. Grit, toughness, and had everything to do with us winning and building a culture. He was one of the players that was here that saw it through.
May you rest in peace.
Yep.
Dan Campbell.
Throwback, tough. We had him in New York. We had him in Dallas. Man, extremely tough. and kind.
Cam Jordan.
Durable, outstanding, personable, funny, and great stamina.
Sean Payton.
Still going.
Yes, you are, brother. You are still going at the highest level, man. I wish you the best. I really enjoyed this hour. It took me too much time, but it was great. It was great to spend time with you, man. I'm proud of you, and I'm just very grateful, really, an attitude of gratitude about our relationship, and
absolutely.
And whatever I can do to help the organization. I'm a Saints for life. You know that. So if you ever need motivation, call me. I have all kinds of cliche sayings you might be able to use.
I like it. Thank you, Mort. Appreciate it.
Hey, good luck in the draft, and good luck down the road, brother. I'll see you.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Sean. See you, bud.